Welcome everyone back to the BS Spooktober. I'm Steven.
I'm Brittany.
And we are the BS Review, here back with 31 Days of Halloween. And today we are reviewing The Haunting of Hill House.
This is a Netflix original that I didn't even know was becoming a thing until we were planning out our videos for this month. And I was like, I wonder if we could put any Netflix originals on our list, and sure could. So we did a book review for this already. If you want to check that out, it is spoiler free. And now we are here to talk to you about the show.
And man, what a show. Right off the back, let me just say that this show took us both completely by surprise, and we're going to talk about it.
For those of you unfamiliar with this story, this is about a family who goes to live in a very old, kind of in need of restoration house with the intention of flipping it to sell, and things start to go very badly for them due to the extreme haunting that is going on in this house, and multiple hauntings really. It's a house full of ghosts and full of history and secrets, and it's such an intriguing twist on a haunted house.
And it's very cool because you get to see, it pulls kind of a It thing where you get to see their experience as children and as adults. So I actually really like this plot. I think in particular the way they do, the way that their chronology of the show is out of whack and you jump around, it's done really well.
If you've been around the channel for a minute recently, you'll know that we're big fans of nonlinear storytelling, especially lately. We've kind of been really into it. And this show does it extremely well. Like Steven said, we have the kids side, we have the adult side, and the stories are all interwoven throughout the whole show. We have these episodes that are focused on one character and their perspective of things, then we move on to another episode with a different character, and you're still moving the plot forward during those. You're not just rehashing the same things over and over again, but you are seeing different perspectives throughout their childhood that you might not have gotten just from one person's perspective.
And I think the thing about nonlinear storytelling that is so good when it's done well is just that it is so intentional. You have to be so intentional with all of the information that you give your audience. And that's probably the strongest thing about the plot for the show is everything feels so intentional. Even the stuff that doesn't necessarily matter to the plot feels like it's intentionally put in there to develop the characters, to move other subplots forward. And it forms a really good whole thing.
While this is marketed as a horror TV show, it is very much a horror TV show, but it's so much more than that. I cried during this show on multiple occasions. This show is about grief and family and sibling relationships and just all of the heartache that goes into just family dynamics and some tragedies that happen along the way. And it is just such a surprisingly heartfelt show with very good horrors sprinkled throughout. This is directed by Mike Flanagan. He has worked on many other horror films. He has done Hush, Ouija, I believe 1 and 2. He's done Gerald's Game, which I don't think we ever did a review for on this channel, but we do recommend. It's on Netflix. Go watch it. He's working on Dr. Sleep that's coming up, I believe, in 2019, 2020. So he's got a pretty good horror rap sheet, and I have really been enjoying his work so far. And after seeing Gerald's Game and seeing this, I definitely want to watch more of his works going forward.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised at how effortlessly he blends the spooks with actual depth and character development and meaning, because make no mistake, this is definitely a character-driven show that also happens to have a lot of spookiness in it.
As with all of our spoiler-free reviews, we are going to be discussing the characters at a very surface level, what we thought about them, and we do have a cast of 7 main characters in the show because the family is mom and dad and 5 kids. So we're going to start with Mom Olivia. It's played by Carla Gugino? I don't know how to pronounce it. She's also in Gerald's Game and many other things. She's the mom in Spy Kids, is probably what most people would recognize her from. But we really liked her in Gerald's Game, and I was really interested to see what she was like in this movie, TV show. I'm gonna keep doing that. Because her character is not in the book. And so it was very intriguing to see how they created this character out of thin air, and she's almost like the central piece of the show in a lot of ways. And I think that she played this part amazingly. She has to do a lot of different facets in this character. She's not, pigeonholed into one type of character. She does a lot throughout this entire series, and I think she did it wonderfully.
Then we have Hugh, the dad, who's played by Henry Thomas and Timothy Hutton. They play respective younger and older versions of him. And I think they both do a good job. I was actually surprised at how much they, emoted alike and sounded alike in the way they talked.
They casted well for the younger and older versions of pretty much all the characters in this.
Yeah, they definitely looked very alike. But I thought both did a great job. I think you get to see a little bit more range from Timothy Hutton as older dad.
He's also the more recognizable face, I would say. I know he's been in a lot of other TV shows. The thing I recognize him from is Leverage. And he definitely brought a lot more gravity to this role than I've seen him play in previous roles. And it was really interesting to see how his character developed from young him to older him.
Yeah, I don't know what else he's been in, but I do know that he's won an Emmy, I believe. Oh. Yeah, so I believe he's done serious roles before, so it's not new to him. And I think he pulls this off. I think he plays just the dad character really well, trying to reconnect with his kids. And I think, he brings some gravitas to the role and a lot of heart.
Something I really love about Mike Flanagan's direction and writing is that he writes these very small moments and scenes that aren't in your face, and the camera work isn't done to focus on this one little comment that's made or this thing, and you gotta watch for it. And I think a lot of that happens with Timothy Hutton's performance in particular. He's got a lot of stuff he's dealing with as older him, and he has, some moments in there that you're just like, oh, I see what's happening. It was really well acted and really well written. Now let's get to the kids. We do have 5 kids in this story, and what's interesting about the kids here is the family dynamic is something that's completely fabricated for the sake of the TV show. The book has, I believe it's 5 characters, 4 or 5 characters that come to the house separately. They don't know each other beforehand very well. They're all strangers essentially, and then they have this haunted house experience together as strangers, and it brings them together. Whereas in this show, they're all siblings who lived there as children and then return as adults. And so we have Stephen, who is the oldest. So Stephen is played by the older actor who is, I think it's Michael. It could be Michelle, how it's written. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce any of these names. Huseman is the older actor, and then the younger actor is Paxton Singleton. And so he is the oldest sibling. He has a lot of responsibility as the oldest, and his character was interesting. He's actually an existing character from the book, but they completely changed what his character was based off of, and I really hated him, but you're supposed to kind of a little bit, I think, is how it's written. So I liked the performance. I think he performed it well, but he was one of the least intriguing characters to me personally because he was so unlikable.
Yeah, I definitely think that the problems that he had didn't necessarily lend themselves to feeling a lot of empathy as the audience, as much as the other siblings for sure. But I still thought that he played an important part.
He played the pompous older brother well.
And the next oldest sibling is Shirley. And now Shirley is played, the older version is Elizabeth Reeser, and the younger version is Lulu Wilson. And I think she does a pretty good job. I think I didn't love her character.
So Shirley is a nod to Shirley Jackson, who is the author of the novel, and she's named after her. And the older version of her is played by an actress who's been in Grey's Anatomy. That's probably where most of you will have seen her before. I agree. She was also a bit of an unlikable character. I think she had some redeeming qualities towards the end, especially as we got some closure on her backstory. However, as a character, she was, again, really unlikable. The oldest siblings were the really unlikable ones, and then we'll get into the ones we absolutely adore in a minute. But Shirley was just... Her character is very important to the plot and very important to the story, but as an individual character, I would not want to be friends with her.
Which I definitely think that, some of that is their personality, but I definitely think that the core focus of this show is, showing how the trauma of Hill House has affected this family, especially as adults. And I definitely think that Stephen and Shirley, that trauma resulted in them becoming more unlikable.
Well, because they were the older ones when trauma occurred, and so I think that they have the most vivid memories of it, and I think that definitely has some effect on them. It's really interesting how trauma has an effect on this family individually and through like places in family like order. I think it's done with such care and such intent.
It makes total sense why Stephen and Shirley, as the oldest siblings, ended up the way they did, but as a result, in terms of like as an audience fun to watch, like sometimes they're a little grating because they are the older siblings who like, I have it together and I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be.
And then we're gonna move on to the middle sibling who is Theo, also Theodora.
And I adora Theodora.
We both love her. I think she was my favorite character. So younger Theo is played by McKenna Grace. She has been in many, many things. As a young child actor, she was in Gifted with Chris Evans, and she's been in lots of other things that I can't think of off the top of my head, but she's a known face. They just dyed her hair a lot darker for this. And then Kate Segal is who plays older Theodora, who I don't think I've seen her in anything, but I know that she has been in other works of Mike Flanagan's. I believe she was in Ouija 2, so was Elizabeth Reeser playing Shirley. So he likes to bring back actors and actresses, as Stephen mentioned earlier, that he's worked with before and enjoyed working with. But Theodora as a character is one of the most fascinating ones that, if you watched our book review, we were really intrigued by her character and felt like some things that were introduced about her character were not done to fruition in the narrative. And I think that they took that and ran with it in the TV show. She has some sensitivities to the supernatural in the book, and they definitely emphasize that in the show and play on it quite a bit. And I would die for Theo. I love her so much. And she was just like the beautiful, broken, but feisty and badass person that like I just am such a sucker for. Theo is also our LGBT character in this story. She, I believe, identifies as a lesbian. It's never specifically stated, but she does have an attraction towards women. She may also have an attraction towards men, but it was not played on in the show. So that was a fun element that they added for this as well, and I think that she played this part incredibly well, and she was so likable.
And then we have Luke, who is played by Julian Hilliard and Oliver Jackson-Cohen. Sorry guys, there's a lot of actors' names to keep up with, especially because the young and older versions. But Luke plays one of the youngest siblings, and I think he does a really good job. He's
technically the youngest sibling.
Technically the youngest sibling, and with Nell, who is his twin, which we'll get to her in a minute. And I think that he is probably like the strongest actor out of the siblings.
Which is so interesting because he was our least favorite character in the book.
Yeah, he very much was. But I think they give him such an interesting story in this, and you really get to see him struggle. Particularly Luke's episode is just really good.
I tried so hard.
Watch, and really gives him an opportunity just to like act and go, and I think he does a really good job.
This show deals with not only the trauma of Hill House, but a lot of like adult repercussions to that trauma, and I think Luke has it the hardest with actual lasting like consequences in his life due to the escapes he chooses to use, and they deal with the subject matter around this with such care, in my opinion. We've watched a lot of things that have, substance abuse details in it lately, and I think that this is one that showed a lot of aspects of that was very accurate and very not exploited. I find that in horror films a lot of time, or TV shows, or horror whatever media, they tend to use illness or mental illness or some sort of problem medically as an exploitation of characters, and I felt like that was something that was completely not done in this show, which surprised me.
Yeah, I very much felt like it was just a natural progression for these characters of saying this stuff happened, the haunted stuff happened to them as kids, and how did it affect them years later as adults, and it affects everyone in different ways, and the way it affects Luke's character is particularly heartbreaking, but it felt very natural.
And then we get to the other twin, Luke's twin, which is Nell. The younger version is played by Violet McGraw, and the older version is played by Victoria Pedretti. I personally think Victoria's performance in this is the standout one. I think so many of them have such stellar performances, but I think that Victoria's performance as older Nell is just the one that stuck with me the most, and she has so much that she has to do with her character and so much trauma as well, but she just has a lot of more facets to her character than some of the other ones do, and she just plays it really well, and I've never seen her in anything else. I think you'd said this was one of her first things.
Yeah, I think it's one of her first things, so.
And I'm really surprised by that. She brings such life to the role, and she's actually also the most book accurate one, I think, as well. While she wasn't part of a family in the book, Nell is a character in the book. Like, her demeanor is very similar to Nell in the show, and so I think that was a really cool thing that they kept parallel. Also, a lot of the little like throwbacks to the book that they kind of have along the show that don't really matter to audiences who haven't read the book, but it's a nice little throw out there for the book readers. A lot of them had to do with Nell as well, so they kept a lot of her original character in the show.
And I think just in particular, her arc is just really good and fascinating, and in a similar way to the book, I do feel like Nell is kind of like the central key character of this show. Without her, I don't think the show would work. And I think she carries it pretty well. She puts the show on her back, and she does a great job.
The writing of her character, as well as all the other characters, but hers in particular, I agree. I think her arc is probably my favorite, and it's so incredibly well written.
So I said earlier in the review that this is definitely a character-driven show that also happens to be spooky, and I do kind of stand by that. I feel like there were definitely some scary moments and some bigger scares. There was, in particular, one that actually made me go, "Whoo!" on the couch.
It was a jump scare. It was one of the few jump scares.
But I think what this show excels in is just the creeping feeling of horror, and particularly the way that they frame stuff, which we'll get to the cinematography and then how it adds to the spooks. But they just sit in scenes, and there's oftentimes stuff creeping in the background, and there's just a very ominous feeling throughout the entire show that I think is what really sits with the spooks. I think as you go through the series, it gets a little less spooky as you learn about it, but I feel like that's natural in any horror thing.
I think, yeah, definitely as you go on, because you're learning how the supernatural elements are working, they're less scary because you have the knowledge behind it. But I still think that they're really cool aspects of the show. And if you're going to watch this and haven't watched it yet, or if you have watched it and want to rewatch it, there are ghosts in the background of every single episode that aren't part of the plot. Like, they're everywhere. We were looking up a list afterwards because I didn't want to look it up during because I was worried about getting spoiled, that we missed, like, at least 2 or 3 in every single episode, and we caught most of the ones that we thought we had caught most of them in the episodes, and then we went back and I'm like, how did we miss these? I don't understand. And like, it's so cool.
Because we were watching knowing that there were going to be hidden ghosts, because I had seen an article before, and so we were looking for them, and I thought we got most of them, but no, we did not.
We did not.
So, a fun little Where's Waldo game for you while you watch, but it's also spooky at the same time.
One of my absolute favorite aspects of this show is the cinematography. There is one episode in particular, I believe it's episode 6, where we thought it was a 23-minute one take, but I read somewhere else that it's like a 17-minute and there's like a small cut and then another one. But there's at least 2 like 17 to 20-minute one take shots in this episode, and it goes across multiple sets. Like, it's not just one contained set, and we're sitting there being like, that means they had to build all of these next to each other just for the sake of doing this one episode. And it's just, we were a good like 5 minutes into it where I was like, have they done a cut yet? And then we started really paying attention. Like, we were planning on pausing to go do something and then come back to that episode. We're like, we can't. We have to wait till they cut it because this is amazing. And it was so well done and so cool. And they had, like, where they were going in and out of different time periods, different sets, having characters move from one spot to another because ghosts are involved. Like, oh, it was cool.
There's definitely some shenanigans going on, but it was just such an impressive thing to watch. And even though they did cut, there was only a couple of them, and so, like, yeah, you only have 13 minutes of one shot, but then it like flips to a 17-minute, and then it's like a 10-minute, and it's just like, wow, how much preparation and setup. And I think it really adds to the scene in particular for that episode because you just get to follow the characters and it feels very natural and fluid. And I think that that kind of style is in the rest of the show as well. Like I said earlier, there's lots of shots where they just like sit with a character in a scene or just like slowly pan out while they're like interacting, so you just get a slowly wider and wider frame which pulls you more and more into it. It's very well done.
Or it pulls out and there's a ghost over here that you didn't see at first. Ugh. Or there's scenes where like we're sitting there being like, there has to be something in the background of this one, and then we couldn't find one. I'm like, they frame so many to like mess with you, even though they're not actually going to have anything in it. Oh, it's just so well thought out. The cinematography, the writing, the act, just everything is done with such precision.
So I think that across the board, we were just so pleasantly surprised by this show. I had high hopes, but this show seriously blew me away. It's definitely one of the best shows we've watched this year. The characters were stellar. It was beautiful to look at and to watch. It was fun to be scared, but also made you feel so much at sometimes for the characters. And I'm almost like I'm thankful and sad at the same time that it's only one season and it's done, because I'm like, I like some of those characters so much. I wish there were more of them, but at the same time, I'm really happy that they were able to get a beautiful arc and close it out. And that's all I can say. I loved it.
It was definitely a favorite. I think this is going to be one of those ones that I watch every Halloween going forward. It's like a 10-hour, beautifully done movie, which, yes, thank you. And for me personally, it had the perfect blend of scares and heart. I have a lot of trouble with a lot of horror movies that are just there to scare you and nothing else. I just don't find a lot of personal enjoyment in stories like that, at least very rarely. I like things that punch you in the gut no matter what genre it is, and this is definitely one of those. And so it just hit my perfect blend of everything I would have wanted in a haunted house story, and I just can't recommend it enough. But those are our spoiler-free thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House. We will have a spoiler-filled discussion coming because we can't stop talking about the show, so I hope you tune into that. But go watch the show first so you can come discuss with us on our spoiler review. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and enjoy our TV show reviews. I'm sure we will have many more to come. Please subscribe if you're enjoying 31 Days of Halloween. We do have the rest of this month to go, and we've got a lot of other fun things coming throughout the month, so I hope you guys join us, and we will see you guys in our next video.